Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. You're with myself, Steve Wiss, and Jonathan Faduba. How's everyone doing? I hope you're well. Jonathan, how's tricks?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. We're back. Hope you are doing well and enjoying the summer. The calls were out, Steve. The calls were out on Twitter. Where is the Nordic Football Podcast? A few tweets we've had. Obviously, I had a little break. Mainly this week because I know you were away. And I've heard reports, Steve, you were on a boat somewhere northern. And it conjured up an image in my mind. So just tell me where you've been. What's delayed the listeners from their fix of the Nordic Pod for a few days?
Well, you know me, ever the sea dog. I was staying on a boat in Hartlepool Marina with the family the last few days. So yeah, something a bit different on the waters there. Yeah, what can I say? You know, it's a bit of an underrated place actually, Hartlepool. I feel a bit like Jeff Stelling here. Do you remember that rant he once did? Was it about Middlesbrough when he defended the town of Middlesbrough up there? I don't know. No, there's some nice people up there. It's actually not a bad area, and I nearly even watched a bit of Hartlepool United, but that was a step too far when I saw their ticket prices. But yeah, it was good, mate, to be on the waters. You know, the waters can be choppy sometimes, can't they? But also it can be a great place to be.
I've just got this conjured image in my mind of you just on a boat somewhere in Hartlepool. Like I never even knew that was a vacation spot. So fair play. I mean, Hartlepool doesn't get the best press at times. So did you have fun? Was it good weather? Like, was it? Yeah. Would you recommend it?
Yeah, it's not too bad. The beaches there are really actually quite good. I mean, compared to say the other best sort of spots in the Northumberland or something, that gets a lot of really good press, like your Bamburghs and that, and Sea Houses. You know, Hartlepool wasn't too bad, and stay on the boat. The kids loved it. A bit of a novelty for them. That's what you got to do. Keep them happy in the summer holidays. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. Yeah,
great to hear. And keeping the kids happy always important. But I tell you, who will not be happy tonight? It's Rosenborg, and that's where we're going to start this podcast this week. We're going to talk about Europe. It's going to be the bulk of the show. We've got a few domestic matters to talk about, of course, but as it being a midweek episode, we will talk about. There's been a lot going on in Europe, isn't there? I mean, we had a tweet I will just briefly read out from loyal follower of the podcast, Joe Gould at 12th Yank, and he said, Steve, that he is looking forward to the next episode of the Nordic Football Podcast because he wants to hear what we have to say about some of the European action that's been going on. Absolutely chomping at the bit for the next Nordic football to come out. So much to cover. So let's get right into it. This game, luckily enough for both of us, was actually on British TV, BBC Scotland, iPlayer as well. We tweeted it out. And so we've both been able to watch this match, Steve. So we're going to do a little bit of maybe not an analysis, but we're going to just look into this game in a little bit of detail. Rosenborg have crashed out of Europe against Hearts from Scotland, Bonnie, Scotland, not too far away from where you were on your boat. Steve, you're the Norwegian expert. You tell us about the game, the context, first leg, what's happened, what does it mean? Rosenborg have gone out.
Yeah. First leg was last week in Norway. Rosenborg raced into a 2-0 lead, but a crucial late-ish goal from Lawrence Shankland reduced the arrears to set things up really close for the second leg. A really good start for Rosenborg early on this evening. They took the lead, I think, inside the 5th minute against Hearts, but there was a very quick equaliser, and I don't know, I just felt like it was always going to be a case of that Hearts would go 2-1 up. I actually felt we were destined for extra time, if I'm being honest. It just felt like one of those matches which was geared up towards extra time. But we didn't get there because there was a late deflected winner for Hearts, and the crowd went absolutely wild. It was, it was a really good game of football, actually. I can't even believe I'm saying this, but I was pleased for Hearts. I was. Their fans really seemed to enjoy it. I was disappointed for Rosenborg, but you could see the joy in the Hearts fans. Every time a goal was scored, they were going wild. It felt like a proper atmosphere. You don't get that these days as often as you should do, and you can tell it meant an awful lot to them. It was a good battle. I think there was not much between the two teams over the two legs, so that was a good. I mean, I think last year's Rosenborg would have beat them over two legs, but this year's Rosenborg aren't as good. They're more sort of a mid-table Eliteserien side against are Hearts the third best team in Scotland, or are Hibs? I'm not sure who's the best out of those two, but that's sort of the level that we're at. Third place in Scotland is about equal to maybe mid-table Eliteserien now.
Yeah, and I actually agree with you on what you said about the atmosphere. It was really, really good atmosphere. They had some sort of like ultras section behind the goal where the third goal was scored, and they went crazy, didn't they? And it was Cam Devlin, Hearts Twitter account tweeted he's bloody done it again in capital letters. They really went mad about this. I'm trying to find the attendance, but I can't see it at the moment. I'm actually going to do a public service announcement here. For anyone who does match commentary on matches, this is some bugbear of mine. Put the attendance, please. And also, if you're doing match reports, put the lineups. Like, that is one of my biggest bugbears, Steve. Like, match reports with low lineup and no attendance. You can even hear my voice back in anger. But yeah, I can't see the attendance now. But it looked like a good crowd. Let's be fair. I watched this game as well, so I've got a few things to say, but I want you to be leading the conversation here as the Norwegian expert. So yeah, goals from Shankland, who I thought looked really good, by the way. 2 from Devlin. Thorvaldsen had given Rosenborg an early lead in the 6th minute, but they just couldn't quite hold on, Rosenborg, could they? I mean, at that point they were 3-1 up in the tie, and then obviously they've been hit with 3 goals essentially to lose it. Steve, what went wrong for you in the second leg in terms of throwing away that lead?
I actually think you mentioned Shankland there. I think he was the difference between the two teams over the two legs. You got Rosenborg striker Ole Christian Saiter. He's injured until the end of the month. He would have led their line. But Hearts' main forward was in operation, 24 goals last year. Thought he had a really good finish for his goal tonight. It wasn't a lucky finish. He knew what he was doing. He looks fairly classy, actually, but not just his finishing ability. He just led the line really well. What went wrong? I mean, I'm looking at Rosenborg 11, and I mean, you actually messaged me during the game. You said, "Are they missing some players here?" Because I think you looked at the team and you probably thought, "Who the hell's that?" Right? I knew what you meant when you asked me that one. Because there are some different players now in this team. They've had some injuries. Some players have moved on, and where did it go wrong? I just think they didn't quite make the most of the chances they had on the break. Like the final pass let them down a little bit tonight. Hearts, I think, maybe just slightly wanted it a little bit more, and I think they deserved it just overall on the night. They just showed a little bit more class, I thought, and they were propelled home by the crowd. But the Rosenborg just a little bit naive, a little bit lightweight, maybe physically at times. There's some young players in that team this evening, so I think if anything, that's where it went wrong for them.
Yeah, I did message you, and I was thinking they're missing 1 or 2 here, and I do agree with your assessment. I mean, firstly, just on Shankland, I think I know he got moved to Belgium, didn't he, at one point, and he's got a decent goal record for Hearts. I have to say, I was impressed with him. He looked a cut above, and I don't know if you'd agree with me, Steve, but I felt the intensity of Hearts. I was actually quite surprised. I thought Rosenborg were dominated in terms of the intensity. I just thought they were. I nearly messaged you to say I think that Hearts will win this. I didn't think it would go to extra time, to be honest.
You just sensed it, didn't you? That Hearts. Yeah. I knew Hearts were going to go 2-1 up at some point in that second half, and then they got the goal quite early, didn't they, in the second half, and it really quietened down for about 25 minutes, and then you all felt in the last 10 minutes that it was, if any team was going to score, it was going to be Hearts. So yeah, they lost. They were just, the intensity got to them in the end, didn't it? Yeah,
I thought they had a lot more energy. And that's kind of why I messaged you. I was like, they're missing some players, maybe Rosenborg. But then at the end of the day, we've talked about a lot this season. They're not, that we had one episode called "Are They Going to Go Down?" So I kind of thought to myself, this is probably a lower sort of mid-table Eliteserien team at the end of the day, isn't it? So that kind of partly explains it. I think if Hearts were playing maybe Glimt or someone like that, maybe it would have been a different prospect. But I really felt that they lacked a bit of physicality, a bit of dynamism, Rosenborg, and Hearts actually had that energy. They were proper up for it. So as the game wore on, I did feel that it was looking like it was looking bleak for them. Steve, I've got to mention this player because this lad's caught my eye. I'm going to be honest. Sverre House of Nipan, 16-year-old. Tell me about him, because for me, he's got a big future in the game. I mean, he was pinging passes. There was one moment in the second half, he pinged a pass about 25 yards out to the wide areas. And then I saw him in about 5 minutes later receiving the ball, beat like two men. I think he won a foul or created a chance. I was just thinking, I was watching him thinking he's doing two jobs here in midfield. To be fair, and I think at 16, Steve, it was a bit of a risk playing him for the whole 90 minutes, because I felt he was, he looked a bit tired towards the end, and he kind of was at fault for that third goal, wasn't he? He got done by Devlin, and then the 1-2 off Shanklin, and then kind of the deflected win. It was a bit unfortunate, wasn't it, for Rosenborg? But in terms of a 16-year-old playing away from home in Europe, that I came out of this game, Steve, thinking this kid's got talent. I love a midfielder. What was your assessment of him? I mean, how's he been settling in?
Yeah, I mean, he's burst on the scene this year.
Where's he come from even? Like, where? Yeah, like...
He's the best. He's probably the best prospect that's come through the Rosenborg youth system in quite some time. You almost forget his age. I mean, then again, some guys like Wayne Rooney were 16, weren't they? 15 even, when he sort of burst onto the scene. I think what this lad's got is, obviously at 16, he's more physically developed than most players at his age. There's a lot more growing to do and all that lot. Of course there is, but he's still, for his age, he's really well developed that way. But he just seems well above his age in terms of intellect as well. Like his vision is excellent. I can't believe that, really. But you do get occasional players like this who, this is why, back in the spring, big clubs were linked with him. Man United, I think, were a hot name link, but several others. He's going to be on the radar of. He's certainly going to be on that radar. Let's just say in the next year or so, he'll probably be leading Rosenborg to somewhere big. Because he does look an excellent prospect. He seems to catch the eye all the time recently, not just in Europe, but domestically as well. So they've got a really good young kid there.
Yeah, Norwegian youngster. I thought he was brilliant, to be honest. Some of the passing was wow. And then the ability to dribble as well. Just like you said, decent physicality. I noticed at the end of the game, a couple of Hearts players went to him. I don't know if he was crying, but I mean, who could blame him? When you're a 16-year-old, I'd be crying as well if playing so well like that and getting knocked out. But it seemed to me they went to him and were sort of like saying, like, the vibe I got was like, don't worry, you're a proper player type thing. Like sometimes when players have that respect when you come off the pitch, do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? When a game ends and you're like, I've got to go and say something to him because he was good. That's how I felt watching that little exchange. But where does this leave Rosenborg, Steve? I mean, not the best of seasons for them, really, in general. Were they banking all their chips on kind of going far in Europe, or were they maybe not expected to go too far? I mean, Hearts now will play PAOK of Greece. So, how would you assess this run and what it says about Rosenborg?
Yeah, when Rosenborg were up, I was actually looking who they'd potentially play next. At that stage, I was getting excited. Then I saw it was PAOK. So in a way, I'm quite glad that I don't have to talk about any Greek teams. I've got into a little bit of trouble on Twitter this week, slagging off Greek teams. So at least we don't have to talk. At least I don't have to talk about
you getting in trouble on Twitter. I would never.
I'm very well behaved on Twitter these days, Jonathan. I'll have you believe, but I was rather dissing the Greek league after Marseille's loss on Tuesday night, and it didn't go down too well with some quarters. So. They're joking aside, that Greek league is actually improving. I actually think PAOK will beat Hearts over two legs. But where was I at? Where does it leave Rosenborg? 8th in the Eliteserien, out of the Norwegian Cup and out of Europe. So they're in kind of no man's land. They've got Svein Marlin is in charge until the end of the season, the former Ranheim boss. They have won 4 games in a row in Eliteserien. So they just got to try and finish as high as they can. Try and get in the top 4 because that can potentially get you into Europe again. Yeah, there's always a team that finishes really strongly second half of the season. They're only 8 points off fourth. When I say only 8, it's quite a lot of points, isn't it? And that's Mulder, who would be looking upwards rather than down. So, yeah, I think they've just got to try and... I mean, it's going to go one way or the other, isn't it? They're either going to finish really strongly, like a train, or they get the final third and they're in mid-table mediocrity. It's really difficult to tell. We just don't know. But I guess there's not maybe that much excitement anymore left for the fans this year.
Yeah, not a great season, sort of petering out really for Rosenborg. And at the end of the day, Rosenborg hearts are broken, literally. So let's move on. We're going to have this is going to be quite a Norway featured pod, by the way. There's a lot to talk about in Norway. So if you do enjoy Eliteserien, then get your cup of tea out and sit down and enjoy yourself, because there's more to talk about. But just wanted to say, Steve, I actually I thought that former Beckel Hacken man, actually Adam Anderson, that right back for Rosenborg, I thought he had a decent game, to be fair. I thought he looked okay. And Holzer I thought was all right, but all in all, yeah, they just lack a bit of dynamism. Rosenborg, I think I can see why they're 8th. I thought the wide areas going forward, they just I thought the 2 wide players in that 4-3-3, they're not amazing in tight spaces, not amazing pace wise, into getting behind. Pereira, to be fair to him, did a decent job, got an assist. But yeah, my assessment in general was that I came out that game thinking I can see why Rosenborg are not having a great season. I feel like there's a lot of work to do there. But let's move on. In better news for Norwegian teams, Steve, there's a lot else to talk about. There's 3 other teams who we've done not so badly.
Yeah, Molde are through to the Champions League final playoff round against Galatasaray over 2 legs. Winner gets into the group stages. They beat heroic Faroese champions KI Klaksvik over 2 legs. They needed extra time, 2-0 after extra time in the second leg. I tip my hat to Klaksvik for an unbelievable run in the Champions League. They will be playing in one of the either Europa League groups or the Conference League group. So fair play to them. Molde really made hard work of that tie, but you've got to give credit to Klaksvik. Then, obviously, in the Conference League, it's more good news for Norway. Brann are surprisingly through against AZ Alkmaar. They beat Aruca, the Portuguese side, over 2 legs. I don't think many people thought they'd do that, to be honest. But fair play, a 3-1 win in the second leg this evening has got them through. Again, tough task against AZ, must be said. But, funny things can happen in football. And Buda Glimt are through a comfortable on aggregate against Punic, the Armenian side who knocked out Kalmar. And the reward for Buda Glimt is a 2-legged tie against Romanian side called Sepsi, who I've got to be brutally honest, I've never heard of them in my life. Apologies to any Sepsi fans listening. But I don't even know how good you are. I've never heard of you before. But, I mean, just going by the name, it does seem like a favourable tie.
Well, I know for one thing, you don't want to get sepsis because it can kill you. But that's
that's what I thought.
That's the medical condition. So we won't talk too much about that. But in terms of the club itself, I guess we'll find out. But I would say, Steve, just on Brann, I read, according to at Nordic Footy, I think it was Nordic Footy or someone. No, I think it was Footmob. Just reading it now. Sorry, the tweet. That according to them, it was one of the biggest attendances they've had in Europe. I'm just going to read the tweet. Tonight was Brann's highest ever attendance for a European game. This is a team who've played the likes of Liverpool, Marseille, PSV, and Hamburg. I don't have the official attendance again. I'll refer you to my previous rant earlier in the show, but that seems incredible as well, really. I mean, Brann, where Rosenborg are sort of slipping at the moment, Brann really seem to be on the up, don't they? That's a massive result.
Well, that's what I was thinking tonight. I'm thinking, is that a sign of where Norwegian football is now? Sort of your traditional powerhouse of Rosenborg back in the day, kind of out of the way, aren't they now? And there's other teams like your Molde, Buda Glimt, Brann, who are Viking now, doing really well in the league, and that they had a really good European run last year as well. The times change, don't they? So, yeah, that's a great one for Brann. Obviously, it would be their first match in Europe at home since they really redeveloped their stadium, so that would explain the attendance record,
right?
But Yeah, fair play to them. And now I think they will now get the weekend off, because any team that reaches the playoff round in Norway in Eliteserien has the right. The league lets them do this. They can postpone their fixture this weekend, and it'll be played later in the season to them for the focus on the playoff round. I know Brann are definitely going to be taking them up on that. I think Molde might well be as well. Whether Glimt might not, they don't always do that. If they have my line of thinking and think they've got a soft draw, they might just keep playing. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Brann will be looking to get their match postponed against Allsvenskan this weekend now to focus on AZ Alkmaar over 2 legs. Big tie, but I mean, we saw a few years ago Rosenborg knocked out Ajax, didn't they, over 2 legs, and that was a huge shock at the time. So this would be maybe something similar.
Yes, I remember that. That was the Adig Benro game, wasn't it? Who can forget that? That was a brilliant. Memories. Now that was a long time ago, isn't it? And how the mighty have fallen, I guess, in Rosenborg's sense. Definitely seems to be sort of times are changing, as you've just said there. Well done to Brann. I mean, they're really. You mentioned Rosenborg's kind of decline. Brann are really having a bit of a rise, aren't they? Let's look at the other ties that are going to be taking place. Then, what are the next ties in this in Europe, and how do you see them potentially going? I mean, you don't need a full prediction, but I mean, they are next week, aren't they? So they're not far away. So maybe you want to sort of talk about them as well and just lay the landscape for us.
Well, I will do my research on Sepsi before the next podcast. But I would back Buda Glimt against any team from Romania, even the champions of Romania, over 2 legs. So I think they've got to expect themselves. They would expect now to make it to the group stages of the Conference League there. Brann are definitely a big underdog against AZ. AZ, didn't they reach the semi-finals of the Conference League last year? Something like that anyway, I think. West Ham beat them, didn't they?
AZ Alkmaar, yeah. Yep.
But we refer back to one of your rants on this podcast a few weeks ago. What lies outside of the Dutch league, aside from the top 3? How good is that league standard? So we will be tested here again, this theory of yours. What are AZ? AZ have only got past the Andorran side. I think, was it 2-0 tonight or something? 3-0 on aggregate. It's not exactly brilliant, is it, from them? I mean, get the job done. They'll be better against Brann, I'm sure. But I don't know. It's one of those ties that if Brann can get their act together at home, you never know, do you?
I think that's an appealing game. That I would like to watch that. That's
a good game.
Yeah.
And then obviously with Champions League now, I will absolutely hang my colours to Molde here. I would certainly enjoy seeing them beat Galatasaray over 2 legs.
I think we're gonna have to cut this one quickly. Yeah, I'm gonna have to interrupt you. But yeah, no.
So it's a tough one because Galatasaray, Turkish football is going to be on the rise again. I'll tell you that now. There's a lot of decent players have moved back into that league. Fenerbahce as well have signed well this summer. Galatasaray are the champions. I used to criticize Turkish football, didn't I, quite a bit? And rightly so. It had a really poor run. But I actually think it's rebounding again. And from what I've seen, I actually think Greek football is as well. So it's weird, isn't it, how it goes in cycles in football. So I actually think Galatasaray will beat Molde over 2 legs. Molde don't do enough in Europe usually. The only thing they might enjoy is now they're the underdog, right? And I think that might suit Molde a little bit more, where they can play on the counter-attack. Maybe the pressure's on the visit on their opposition, but hell's bells, you don't want to be going. I can't think of a worse place to go for a second leg, can you, than Galatasaray away?
I think there's definitely. I know you're a Leeds fan, but I think there's definitely a Newcastle star. I will love it if they beat them. Love it.
Well, it was gonna be. Yeah, basically a bit like your, Hammarby thing the other week. Yeah, I would love it if they beat them. Yeah, it'd be.
But the thing is, I mean, just like on that point, Wilfried Zaha is going to be playing against Molde potentially. So that's that's the level of Galatasaray players. They've got Icardi, they've got Zaha, they've got someone who you'll be very familiar with, Steve, that might give you a bit of nostalgia. Cedric Bakambu.
Mate, I'm telling you that, yeah.
He gives me a lot of French football nostalgia. They got some good players, so yeah, no, definitely.
It's a good squad now.
Yeah, that looks tough. What about Glimt?
Yeah, they should pretty comfortably get past Sepsi over 2 legs. You
think they'll win that game? Like you know, no doubt. Yeah, okay.
If they focus on it, I mean, I think that match against Punic was a potential banana skin. It's a tough trip to Armenia. That's a good warm up, isn't it, for this sort of match? Glimt are well experienced in Europe now. They know how to. Some of their better performances are in Europe nowadays. So, yeah, I think they want to be involved in a Conference League group stage again. And this is all good for Norwegian coefficient as well. By the way, Molde are guaranteed to be in the Europa League group, whatever.
Yeah,
I think Glimt will have a good chance of making it into a group, and Brann. Why not? Just say we ended with 3 Norwegian teams in group stages. Would that have ever happened before? I don't think so. So
yeah, and ironically, just looking at AZ Alkmaar's result, their second goal tonight was scored by a player who played for Hammarby, Michael Lardo. So that tells you a little bit. Maybe I got in a bit of trouble for my rant, by the way. So I'm gonna go easy on Dutch teams this week. I put my foot in it a little bit in some ways, but
you're getting into trouble as well.
It's your bad influence rubbing off on me. But I did have a bit of a rant on that. You can go back to a few episodes if you want to hear that conversation. But yeah, Michael Lardo on the score sheet, which is nice. He was a Hammarby prospect who was sold on, and I do quite like him actually. I think he's a decent player. Didn't get to see a huge amount of him in Allsvenskan, but he scored for Alkmaar. So that'll be a challenging one. Do you have a prediction, just like forecasting it now? We'll talk about it next week, of course, but are you leaning one way or the other in terms of who might go through in that game?
Which match was that again?
AZ Brann.
Oh yeah. Do you know what? I've got a gut feeling Brann might do it. I mean, call me absolutely mad there, but I'm just going with a gut feeling. I don't know. There's something special been going on at Brann, and I'm gonna listen to what you said a few weeks ago. Is Dutch football that good outside the big 3? So I'm gonna say Brann. Why not? I mean, a lot of logic does point towards AZ, but let's see them give it larger.
I think Brann will be up for it. That's one thing for sure. I mean, just to be balanced, I'm a man who believes in balance. FC20 beat Riga tonight 3-0 and progressed 5-0. So, the Hammarby's conquerors have sort of progressed again. But yeah, Brann, just to wrap it up in terms of that Aruka win, Myra, Knudsen and Bard Finner on the score sheet. A fantastic win for Brann in front of a rowdy crowd. So well done to all 3. Should we move to domestic matters, or should we talk about Hacken briefly? Maybe we should.
Let's move to, what do you want to do? Stay with Europe?
Let's stay with Norway. Norway.
Norway.
Yeah. We'll talk about Hacken. There's only one team, isn't it? So let's stay with Norway. Keep the flow of it. And I mean, we have got a lot to talk about, but the main thing on your itinerary this week, Steve, is Viking.
Mm-hmm.
Now we need to talk about Viking because there's been a few questions actually about them as well. But generally speaking, they're a team that have gone a little bit under the radar, Stephen. Now it's time to address that. So take it away.
I think so. Yeah. 9 league games in a row now they've won, Viking, and they're joint top of the Eliteserien table with only 12 matches left. So absolutely no doubt they have to be considered a legitimate title challenger. 41 points each for them and Glimt. Tromsø have a game in hand, and if they win that, then they would go 2 points behind both of those two, although with a much inferior goal difference at this stage. So we've got a title race, haven't we? It looked like Glimt were going to be running away with it, but 2 losses in a row have set them back a bit, and it's game on again. So I know there's a few people asking me now, can Viking win the title? This is a huge shock. What's going on? How have they been able to win so many games? So yeah, I'm going to address that a bit now and tell you what the hell's been going on.
We have one question from Alex at P2P_Alex. Thanks so much for your comments. I always see him commenting on Twitter, which is great. He says, it would be great to hear at Meatman Soccer talk about how big a surprise Viking have been. And I guess it says get they do it, but I guess that means can they do it? Steve, what is the key to Viking's success? I mean, how big a surprise is this? I know they are quite a big club, actually, aren't they? But what's the key to the success? And I think I know what you're going to say here, but can they do it?
I think, where did I have them pre-season prediction? I think I had them about 6th or 7th, maybe. They were really hard to forecast this season because last year was just a down year for them. Players left the club. They had a European run and just kind of drifted. But the year before, they were really good. So I didn't know which direction they were going to go. I certainly didn't expect this. They're a team that are capable of beating anyone on their day, but usually can lose to anyone on their day as well. For them to go 9 wins in a row, I never would have seen that coming because they are the sort of team who would just have a stupid game where they let something slip and lose to someone random. So it's a bit of consistency. They've overachieved with their metrics, but not as, nowhere near the level of, say, a Tromsø, because Viking do have significant firepower in their ranks. They've got some really good attacking players. Zlatko Tripic is the heartbeat of the team, obviously, the captain, the final third. Lars Jørgen Salverson would be an interesting one because Glimt, of course, sold him to Viking this season at the start of the season. So imagine if he was to move there and beat Glimt to the title. That would taste quite sweet to him. The lad they brought in from Australia, Nick D'Agostino's had a good year. And I think at the back, David Bracalo has impressed me. But I do look at their numbers and, they have an expected goals against average per game of 1.53, which is in Eliteserien terms, bottom half in terms of that. Now, they have conceded an average of 1.39 per game, so not really overachieved it, but it does show you that they are defensively vulnerable. That's my concern heading into the final 12 games. There will be matches where they're just not tight enough, and inevitably some teams will score goals on them. And then can you rely on winning shootouts week in, week out? Well, at the moment they can because they've got the firepower, but will they be able to keep that up? I'm not sure. But they have to be respected because they contain a squad with good quality in, led by a leader, and their overall underlying metrics are not too bad. So let's wait and see.
Yeah, the next 3 games of Stabæk at home, Molde away, Vålerenga at home. I mean, Steve, all I can see, I mean, it's like Puff Daddy might say or something. All I can see is green on their recent form guide. It's wins. I mean, they beat Lillestrøm 3-1 in the most recent game. Goals from Solbakken, Salverson, and D'Agostino, as you mentioned there. I mean, before that, they've beaten Glimt 3-2. They've beaten Brand 2-0 away, 2 teams that you've just been praising. They're really on fire, aren't they? I mean, that is an incredible run. You probably think it's maybe they might just run out of steam a little bit. Is there anything? I mean, we've still got the window open. We're going to talk about transfers in a minute. Is there anything you'd say they need to do? Is there any maybe late business? Is there any maybe outgoings that could affect them? Because certainly in Sweden, in the title race, which we'll talk about in part 2, there's been transfers that are going to maybe alter the whole title race. So from your point of view, is there anything that could either go their way or go the other way?
You can never really rule anything out, can you, in football? But I think last year was the year where they got affected more negatively by players leaving. So it might be sort of good timing that this is the year that they're in contention. In terms of bringing players in, I would like them now. You know what I would do if I was in charge of them, the sporting director or whatever, I would put my eggs into this basket now. This might be the one chance they have of winning a title in the next, say, 10 years. So I'd go all out to try and beat Bodø Glimt and Tromsø and Molde to the gold medal. What they could just do with a little bit more depth, I think, in defensive areas. Maybe another centre-back. Tripic would be irreplaceable. If Tripic got injured, they'd have no chance of winning a title, in my opinion. So someone in his position, I guess the problem is how can you replace an irreplaceable player? You can't really, can you? So there's maybe a bit more depth at left wing or in attack somewhere. But if I was in their position, I would be looking to try and put a lot of eggs into this basket to get that title.
Yeah, and they're actually quite a big club, Viking, historically. They've won 8 Eliteserien titles. The most recent one is 30 years ago, so 1991. They actually got a good track record. What a story it would be if Viking won the league. I mean, I'm right in saying Brand are their local rivals as well, right? So they recently beaten their Derby rivals. That would maybe put a spanner in Brand's works, wouldn't it, if they were to go and win the league? Considering we've talked so much about Brand this season, Viking might sort of usurp them and do the title, and that would be incredible. But yeah, well done to everyone at Viking, because I feel like they're a team that maybe we don't give a huge amount of credit to at times. If you do support Viking, I would love to hear from you. Tweet us at Nordic Footpod on Twitter, or X as it's now called. Or if not, maybe make a comment on YouTube if you're listening to this on YouTube.
We do have a lot of followers who are Viking fans. Paul the Northman, he once came on this pod as a guest.
Yeah.
And he's a season ticket holder there. And there's a lot of excitement. The fans have been brilliant this year, by the way, at home. They've been I think they've got the best home record in the Eliteserien. Yeah, 7 wins out of 9. The fans have been superb. Like, they've been like the proper 12th man. You don't want it. It's not a place. That place is going to be rocking now, rest of the season. You really are.
Yeah. So, yeah, fantastic story. And let's see if they can keep it up, because that would be a bit of a fairy tale, wouldn't it, to be honest? 30-year wait. But yeah, thank you for that, Steve. I hope that answers your question, Alex, as well. And I know you've asked about Elfsborg, so we will talk about them in part 2. So stay tuned for that. But now, before we wrap up part 1, Steve, a couple of other talking points. Well, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Tromsø. I know you're not.
Well, Tromsø
exactly,
didn't play.
No, you're
Tromsø
not exactly.
have only played 1 match since we last did a pod. I think they beat Lillestrøm at home. To be honest, I thought both Tromsø and Viking would maybe slip up against Lillestrøm, because that's the sort of fixture which is difficult. Yeah. But both beat them. I thought both beat them fairly convincingly, to be honest. I know Lillestrøm are not perhaps at their best now, but they're not that bad either. So I think it was really encouraging for both of them teams. They have to be considered as a serious title challenger. I think Tromsø's game in hand is against Stabæk, and that comes in September. That's very winnable. If they win that, they're just 2 points behind them both. After 18 games, if you're in the mixer, you're in the mixer, right? It's not like after 10 games and you're like, oh, they're probably going to fade in the next 10. If you're still in the mixer with a third of the season left, then yeah, you're a contender. Doesn't matter how you get the points, does it? It's about getting the points, I suppose.
If Tromsø win the league, will you go vegan for any period of time?
I'll be honest. If I can't see them. Their metrics are not good enough long term. They're not. I mean, Viking do have legitimate strength in there, and if they.
But I know the metrics. But if Tromsø won the league, is there some sort of humble pie you're going to have to eat here?
I don't know. I don't want them to. I'd rather one of the other two win the league.
But I mean, you got to be fair. If they win the league, they deserve it. You can't just rule them out just because they're proving you wrong.
I would, yeah. At the end of the day, they're one of them teams that they do keep getting results. But I just can't get behind them the way they play the football. I like teams to be, dominating games like the way the top two have been doing, really. So
the underdogs Tromsø continue to
do it. It's going to be winning a more sort of ugly fashion. And then the other thing, look, I obviously hate. I'm not a man who likes to be proved wrong in any form of life. It very much frustrates me.
The underdogs Tromsø continue to make Meatman Soccer squirm.
I don't want them to make me keep looking bad. If they keep getting results, then I'm just a mystifying loss how they're doing it. And I hate that.
For those who can't actually see what's going on here, Steve.
Don't you just hate that in football, though, where you can't explain? Where you can't explain how it's possible to keep going in football. It can sometimes happen, can't it?
I know exactly.
If they, of course, there'll be some humble pie if they win the league. But I hope I'm proved right about them.
I totally understand what you're saying, and another win for them. They continue to win. They've beaten Glimt away 2-0, and obviously, like you mentioned there, the 3-1 winner at Lillestrøm. The next 3 games are Sandefjord at home, Salzburg away, and then Rosenborg at home. So we'll come back when they have those games. Listen, if they're still winning by then, Steve, you're really going to be your collar's going to be really sweaty. But let's move on. And there's a few other little talking points. We've got transfers window is open at the moment, Stephen. There has been some significant movements, haven't there? And rumours and just tell us what's the latest in the Eliteserien transfer window. Who are the key names that maybe are leaving the league? Who are the key names maybe joining the league? Who are the movers and shakers?
Well, I don't know if you've been feeling like this yourself recently, but it feels like every day or every 2 or 3 days, a big departure's left the league. Recently it was Jonathan Bruins to OH Leuven in Belgium. Is that how you pronounce them? You might know better than me.
He's left.
He's gone, yeah. He's been sold. Akor Adams, obviously, we knew he was probably going to leave this window, but Montpellier snapped him up for €4.5 million. He scored 2 goals on his debut against Le Havre. CD Jatta's the latest one on the move. He's another one gone to Belgium. I can't even remember which club. Was it Club Bruges or someone like that? No, he's not gone to Belgium. He's actually gone to Austria. Sturm Graz.
Wow.
Apologies there. I didn't expect him to be on the move yet this window. But yeah, it feels like every 2 or 3 days I look, like someone has left that I didn't expect to be leaving yet until maybe next year. So, they're getting decent money at 2.61 million for a 20-year-old. That's not bad money. And Brout Bruins, I think, was sold for roughly the same figure. Yeah, 2.6 million. So, but yeah, there's been a lot of these players leaving the league this window.
Who would you say is the biggest loss? Akor Adams, you talked about you don't like being proven wrong. You've certainly been proven right on him because our Patreon analysis, we managed to get that one in before he left the league, Steve. He's gone to Montpellier. That's a massive loss for the league, isn't it? I think.
Of course it is.
Based on what you've been saying. But who else is who else is going to basically change the course of the season with their departures for respective teams?
Yeah, we've. I think there have been. Look at Odd have lost Leopold Valstedt to Blackburn now. That was obviously confirmed. Konrad Valem left to Sparta Prague for $1.5 million. They've actually signed someone, a forward called Zakaria Mugis from a team in Israel called FC Ashdod for $500,000. So that's quite a significant investment. Andrei Ilic has come in from RFS. The Latvian side into Vålerenga, 1.1 million to replace CD Jatta. And they signed Elias Hagen as well. But yeah, when you're losing talents like Odin Thiago Holm, CD Jatta, who else was lost this window? Brout Bruins has gone, Akor Adams. There's been Vettelson, of course. It certainly feels like there's been quite a few decent talents gutted from this league. So Bert Riese left Mulder. Sheriff Sinian went on his bike as well. Yeah, I don't know. I just expected some of these players to maybe last the whole season. Maybe I was in Clark Cuckoo land expecting that, but I feel like teams are striking a lot earlier now. They think they don't want to miss out on the talent before someone else comes and grabs them. So you're almost paying a little bit for potential rather than a proven talent for a certain period.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I think it means that scouts have to be quicker maybe when they're looking at these leagues. And listen, we talked about Nipan just then. We'll even be there by the end of the season. Who knows? So, a lot of movement. One final talk about before we move on from Norway and wrap up part one is Lillestrøm. What's been going on there? Because obviously that whole managerial controversy. Your video on YouTube it's done spectacularly well, by the way. Well done on that. But yeah, there's been some developments managerial-wise.
The reaction video. What is it? People seem to like the reaction videos and
I think that's our most viewed on YouTube. Yeah, that's
I don't know what it is. I always thought it was an American thing that instant reaction to this and that. I've been on a reaction show recently for someone else that I work for, and I'm like, what? It's not really a thing over here in the UK as much as it, but I feel like it's becoming more popular now anyway. But Lillestrøm, 6th place, kind of lost their last 2 games. Like I mentioned, feels like they're almost going nowhere a little bit. They've hired Eirik Bakker, the former Sogndal manager, former Leeds player. as their head coach until the end of the season. I think this is probably a good move. They needed to. It got to that stage where the interim sort of caretakers just couldn't do any more. They needed a more permanent figure in. Bakker hasn't been actually a manager for a couple of years now. Good time for him to come back in the game. His experience respected as well. And let's see what he can do until the end of the season, really, because they're in a similar place to Rosenborg now. They've got 4 more points, but there's not an awful lot left on their plate to play for. So can they squeeze into the top 4 with a good run? Yes, they possibly could. So let's see how Bakker does. He's got the job till the end of the season. Jury's out on him. And, they've got to take it from there, really. But I think it's important for them to put a figurehead in place.
How psychologically affected do you think they've been by that whole controversy?
I think initially it fired them up a lot. And I think there was a lot of the players wanted to prove a point. And they're quite a together, tight-knit group. But combined with injuries, combined with the whole circus, Adams then got sent off and missed his last 2 games, and then he got sold. When you lose the top scorer in the league, it's not going to help, is it? I just thought they got outplayed by Viking and Tromsø over the last 2 games. They weren't terrible, but they deservedly got beaten by 2 teams who they really, going into the season, would have expected to finish above. And I would have expected that as well. But this season, Lillestrøm, Tromsø seem to have moved above them in the pecking order. And I think there are going to be a few searching questions as to how it's happened because, for most of the year, they did have the top scorer in the league, like I said. So, a bit disappointing for Lillestrøm. Again, like Rosenborg, I don't know how the season's going to end up. Either it peters out into mid-table or they do get on a run and maybe try and threaten the top 4. It's more likely to peter out, though, if we're being honest.
Yeah, and Eric Bakker, anyone who remembers football kind of in the 90s and early 2000s, obviously played 143 games for Leeds United, your team there, Steve, and also played Aston Villa. And his most recent managerial role was Sundal. So he's not managed for a while, I think, according to Wikipedia.
He was actually a really underrated player in that Leeds team. No one ever really talked about him, but he did a hell of a job in that midfield for Leeds back in the day. I think he's got a good temperament about him, and I think he's a good choice.
Maybe we need to get him on the pod. He'd be an interesting guest. I'd like to see you talking to a former Leeds player. But yeah, that'll wrap it up for part 1. I think we've covered a lot of topics. In part 2, we've got a bit of a shorter section in Sweden. There's not as many talking points, I don't think, but there are 1 or 2 little things to tick off the list. As I said, this week it's more about Europe and kind of just giving an overview of what's been going on, because obviously we've got games coming up this weekend as well. So let's dip into that and 1 or 2 other transfers as well to talk about in part 2. So stay tuned and we will discuss Elfsborg, we'll discuss Celtic and a few other things after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. We were talking about European matches in the first part there. Norway's had a really strong year with 3 teams potentially still making the group stages. Not been so strong for Sweden, but Häcken have regained some pride to a degree. They will be at least in the Europa Conference League group stage, whatever, possibly the Europa League. We're going to talk about their match against Zalgiris now, and they're going to be facing Aberdeen next, by the way, for a spot in the Europa League. Joining me is Jonathan Faduba. So Häcken, they've dominated Zalgiris over 2 legs. That's not the easiest tie in the world. Do you think they might look back now and just have real regrets against that KI Champions League tie and wonder what if?
Yeah, I see, brother. I've just popped out to get I've just ordered my Tromsø shirt online in the break, by the way, while you're away. So that's ordered in the post. Looking forward to getting that one. No, I think there's a bit of regret, but I mean, Oasis once said it, didn't they? Don't look back in anger. You got to move on in life, and I think they've kind of moved on suitably well. Smashed this team that they've knocked out, isn't it? Zalgiris Vilnius 5-0 tonight, 8-1 on aggregate. I mean, that's the old Hacken that we know and love. Absolutely romping home, scoring goals for fun. And that's the team, like you said, Leslie, that just didn't show up against Klaksvik, really. And I guess there'll always be an element of regret, I think. But the positive news for Beko Hacken tonight is that they're guaranteed European group stage football for the first time in the club's history, which is a massive achievement. So well done to everyone at Hacken. We've got to say that that's a massive achievement. We do have a Y Scout blog about them that's just come out last week, which we tweeted on Twitter at Nordic Football, or you can go to our partners at Y Scout. Shout out to Y Scout, providers of data and analysis, excellent platform. And we always thank them for their support of our work. And yeah, you can go and check out the blog I wrote on Hacken if you like. But yeah, essentially, it's a monumental achievement for Hacken to be in European group stage football. It's been confirmed tonight as well that they'll be playing the games, I believe, in the European. Is it Europa League? Will be. Is it definitely Europa League or is it Conference League?
This is a Europa League qualifying. So whoever wins it, they're in. Yeah, if
they win or lose, they're guaranteed Europe, but obviously it depends which league. Yeah, so so basically the games apparently will be played at the old Ullevi Stadium, which is the new stadium. No, the new stadium, but it's the old stadium.
Why is that?
It's a much bigger. I don't think Hacken's stadium meets the requirements. I think I read something about they need to maybe dig up the pitch, and there's a concert going on, or they don't have enough time to do the preparations. Basically,
old Gamla Ullevi.
No, I think it's newer Ullevi, which is the old one. It's always a confusing thing in Gothenburg.
I am absolutely. You're very confused there.
New Ullevi is the old stadium,
right?
And Gamla Ullevi is the newer stadium which Beko Hacken play in.
Right.
But I believe Gamla means old, so I think that means old Ullevi. But someone will correct me on that if I'm wrong. But yeah, basically it's inverted. So essentially they'll play at the old stadium, the bigger stadium, the historic stadium. That's what I've read this evening.
Is this going to be a grass surface?
Hopefully that'll be confirmed. I'm not sure yet. I read it was traditionally a grass surface, but you're putting me on a spot here, so I don't want to say things that I don't know are factual. But that's why
there is a question.
Just read this evening on Gothenburg Post. But anyway, the point I'm making is Hacken have done well. They've made a new signing, Steve, actually, on the subject of signings. And his name is Serdan Hrstić. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he is a new striker. He's the Benny Traore replacement. Come from Serbia. He's come from Spartak Subotica, and he's flying at the moment. I mean, he's already scored. He scored 2 in the first leg, and he got another one tonight in a 5-0 win. Ibrahim Sadiq got 2. Gustafsson also got 1. And they're starting to look a little bit better again now, obviously with Layuni there as well. Sadiq's still there. He's not left yet. Who knows what will happen. But yeah, they just, if they'd had Hrstić for the Klaksvik game, I think they'd have gone through. It was literally a case of
they just needed a strike. They needed a figurehead striker.
They sold Benny Traore a week too early. That's the bottom line. Like that week that week has basically cost them Champions League football. You know, that the hesitancy between the two signings, one leaving, one joining. So I enjoyed seeing Benny Traore make his debut for Sheffield United in the Premier League last week as well. So well done to him. But yeah, I think it's a great achievement for Hacken to be in Europe for the first time in the history in group stages. So. And in terms of Aberdeen, I think we had a question, Steve.
We did have a question. By the way, Layuni has done really well for them. He's been a great signing as well. I've got him wrong. I'll hold my hands up there. He looks $1 million better than when I last saw him. So fair play to him. He looks excellent. The famous Aberdeen at the famous Reds. How do you rate Aberdeen's chances against Häcken? Do you think it'll be as easy as it was for us a couple of years ago, or are they a stronger team this time around? Thank you very much for that question. I quite like Aberdeen as a club, I must say. Always have done. Got some good support up there. They had a really disappointing first half to the season last year up there. Was it their manager who then went on to relegate Dundee United, I think. What was his name? He was useless, the manager they had there, and then they turned it around the second half of the season. So, interesting clash. Is this Häcken going to be a tougher version for them?
Oh, 1,000%. I mean, I'm just looking at Zalgiris. I mean, they knocked out Malmo last season. Let's not forget. From the Champions League qualifiers, they beat them 3-0 on aggregate, home and away. They won. So I don't know what changes have gone on in Zalgiris, but they've obviously the team has changed quite a lot. I know Malmo really poor last season. But for Häcken to beat them 8-1 on aggregate is a massive statement of intent compared to the way Malmo went out with a whimper. Just looking at, in terms of Aberdeen, they won 5-3 on aggregate as well. They beat them 5-1 in the Conference League 2 years ago. That's not going to happen. I mean, if it happens, maybe I'll go vegan. I don't know. I'll be.
What if Aberdeen go through? You'll go vegan?
No, if they beat Häcken 5-1. I'm not sure who'll go through. I think it'll be it'll be a great game actually. I hope it's on BBC Scotland. I think it'll be two great ties. You know what? I was impressed by Hearts tonight. I've come away from that game thinking Scottish football is where does it rank? Like, obviously, I had the rant about Dutch football. I'm just thinking to myself, where does Scottish football rank at the moment? Because they came out with a freshness that was. You don't see it that often in
Hibs also are through against Luzern, and Luzern are not a bad side. Swiss football in the worst
Luzern knocked out Djurgården.
Yeah, so I do actually think, and I have slagged off Scottish football on this podcast down the years, haven't I? But actually, I believe Scottish football is on the rise again, in general, bit by bit. I think it's getting better again.
I don't think. I mean, Häcken sort of play with the sort of intensity that I thought Hearts brought. They had a bit of an urgency about them. There's certain teams in Allsvenskan that don't have that urgency, and I thought Rosenborg got blown away by it really. So, listen, I have not watched Aberdeen lately, so I can't really comment in terms of them compared to Hearts, but I don't expect it to be a 5-1. I think it'll still be tough. I think there'll be goals. Both teams will score, but I think with the new signings, the way they've seemed to have gelled almost instantly, I think Häcken have got every chance.
Yeah, Jim Goodwin, that was the manager who was absolutely terrible for Aberdeen last season. Got sacked after they lost 6-0 to Hibs, then went to Dundee United and relegated them. So I think he would have relegated Aberdeen the way he was keeping going with them. But so for them to rebound and qualify for Europe was really good for them. I think it's going to be two very interesting ties. I think both teams are actually better than when they last faced each other. So the standard could come down to a small margin again, maybe even extra time penalties. That switch of venue, I don't think will help Häcken. If it's just say it was a grass pitch, they are really good in front of their own fans, aren't they? As well.
Yeah, just to be clear, I don't know if it's for the qualifier. I just mean for the group stages, like whether they're in the Conference League or the Europa League. The group stage games are going to be played there. I don't know about next week's game. I assume it will be played at Bravida, but I don't know.
Yeah. So it's going to be two good matches to watch. Must say, both teams are going to be in some sort of European group at least, which eases the pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think the one thing to conclude in terms of answering the listener question. Thanks a lot for the question. I think you can expect a much better Häcken this time. I think it'll be a lot harder this time around, and I think Aberdeen will have a tough game on their hands.
Yeah. Okay, move on to the next point then. Just a couple of... we're not going to go extensive into Allsvenskan, but one result which we can't let slip is the magnificent win for Mjällby. 1-0 at home against Malmo on Monday evening. They've done the double over Malmo this season. Anders Torstensson, I actually tweeted after the game to congratulate him. I watched this match and I know a lot of people lost money on this game because so many were betting on Malmo before the game. So many were betting on in-running goals as well because they battered them. Malmo on stats. They absolutely battered them. I don't really know how they didn't score a goal in this game, to be honest, Jonathan. But once again, Mjällby are their absolute bête noire. How have Mjällby managed to do the double over Malmo this season?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you watched it like you just mentioned there. I didn't actually see this game. I was in Birmingham. So while you were in Hartlepool, Steve, I also had a few things going on. But sounds like you can tell me more.
Well, I think my question to you is in sort of, the general makeup of Mjällby. Like, what is it about their squad, their sort of manager tactics? I mean, in a way, it was a little bit of a repeat of the first match, apart from I thought Malmo did have some better chances. But every time they had a shot, there seemed to be someone blocking it. Every time a cross came in, you think, they're just one little pass away from really getting a massive chance. The ball seemed to be cleared. And, when the shots did come on target, the goalkeeper had a really good game as well. So it was one of those. I think if that was played 10 times in that fashion, I think Malmo probably would have won the match about 5 times, to be honest. Let alone they wouldn't have lost it very often. But it's unbelievable how they continue to be the scourge of Malmo.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that a lot of people would have lost money on it. They must not have watched the first game because Mjällby went there and won, and they were comfortable. And they must not have listened to the Nordic Football Podcast because we talked about it, Steve. We talked about their record, Mjällby's record against Malmo in recent years under Torstensson. They've got a fantastic record. I think they've now beaten them pretty much every time. I think maybe one draw. But apart from that, it's been 3 defeats. And yeah, they've just become a total bogey team. Something's going on at Malmo at the moment, Steve. They're wobbling, and this gives the advantage to Elfsborg and Han Hacken. It gives them a bit of hope because, I know your famous quote, they're going to win the league by 15 points, and I thought my season prediction is they'll win the league. Still not going to move away from it just yet, but I think it is turning a little bit, and part of the reason is because of just these transfers they made. They just don't seem to have recovered from losing Hugo Larsson and Christiansen. I think the new signings haven't quite gelled. The back 5 that we talked about a lot, and this sort of tactical innovation from Rydström, it's kind of gone a little bit flat. I think Jorgensen, Cornelius. I mean, they I didn't think they were great against Halmstad, even though they won that the week before. Just seems like this rebuild is kind of put a bit of a dampener on their form. They've since the summer break, they've had 3 wins, 3 losses and 1 draw, and it just seems that I think this turnover they haven't quite gelled, and they're running out of games obviously to get it right. The balance has gone. If they'd kept that team that was in the first half of the season, they might already be nearly champions, but they've really suffered from losing those players. For Mjällby, it's efficient Torstensson, and he's very good at playing in these sort of big games, especially against Malmo. They've won 3 of the last 9 games against Malmo, which is good for such a small team. And like I mentioned, they've since they returned to Allsvenskan, Malmo have only beaten them a couple of times. So yeah, it's a really they have really become like a bogey team, and I think maybe we can even maybe start to look towards Europe. It's not out of question for them to maybe push for one of those sort of top places. They're only 5 points behind Djurgården, and they're 6th. So I think that they can be really proud of the work that they've done this season under Torstensson. I know, last time when we had him on the podcast, they nearly broke the Allsvenskan record for clean sheets in a row, goals conceded. They did amazingly well, and this season again, he's proven that he's. I know it's kind of maybe Mjällby's just his club, but he's proven over the 2 years, I'd say, that he's a very creditable manager at this level. He could potentially be looking at maybe even he might attract the eyes of bigger clubs. I don't think it's something he might want to do. He mentioned he loves his golf when he joined us on the pod a couple of years ago, but certainly he's punching above his weight with Mjällby, a small club, and beating the big boys here and there. So yeah, really big win. I think in terms of the conclusion there, like I say, Mjällby outside bet for Europe, Malmo still maybe just slight favourites, but few causes for concern.
Well, they're down to 3rd place now because Häcken are up to 2nd. Of the 3 teams up there, you could argue that Häcken maybe look the best equipped, although they've got European group stages now, which might be a problem. Elfsborg lost again, 1-0 against Hammarby. That's the 2nd loss for them in 3 games. Are they starting to show signs of cracking? I do worry about Elfsborg at the minute because it just seems when the pressure's on, they can't always deliver anymore. That said, is losing away to Häcken and Hammarby that bad? Is it that bad? Hammarby can be a good team on their day. But they've had problems with the transfer window, haven't they, Elfsborg, which is hindering them.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, I know you just mentioned there Viking and the likes of Tromso and of course and Mulder and Glimt. We've got a real 3-way battle on our hands for the title this season. I think in Sweden, we really are sort of looking at a real nice end to the season. So yeah, Elfsborg were wobbling. It wasn't the best of results for them, and I think that it's like at the moment it's kind of let Hacken back in now. You know, who wants this title? And I feel like Hacken, they've had their wobble with a few. You know, they lost a couple of games, didn't they? Lost to Varnamo and that kind of thing, and dropped some points here and there, but with their European commitments. But they're almost coming out of the back of that now, you know, and looking in good shape. But yeah, it wasn't Hammarby. I think I tweeted this that FC20 just seemed to have single-handedly rejuvenated Hammarby's entire season. Like that, just the whole animosity of that tie. Like there was real. I think I tweeted and someone even replied like, we don't like they really hate like 20 Hammarby fans now. You know, they genuinely. I mean, that attack from the fans and things like that. Obviously, they crossed the line, and there's a real like dislike for. I think it's just fired up the whole club. You know, I feel like Hammarby were just sleepwalking this whole season, and the 20 ties just woken them up. They're like, wait a minute, like, you know, they really were outraged by that whole tie, and it's really rejuvenated the whole club. And I think now they've come out of it the other side like with a bit of maybe something to fight for, a bit of passion, which they lacked. And yeah, it's a big win. I said before that I think Roma is a massive loss, and I think that we've got another loss to talk about in a minute in terms of a transfer. It was actually Gustav Lagerbielke's final game for Elfsborg. He did play, even though the deal to Celtic was at an advanced stage, according to reports, and he's now since made that move. But at the end of the match, he kind of like clapped the fans, and you know, you're seeing pretty clear he's leaving. But I think that is it's a sign that Elfsborg, that I think they need to be honest, Elfsborg need the window shut. Like if the window could shut tomorrow, Elfsborg would take it. I think they're just worried about losing players. I think they would have wanted to keep Lagerbielke. They would have wanted to keep Roma, and I think I think it could potentially knock their, like you just mentioned there about Viking. Certain players that if they're missing, they've got no chance. I think Elfsborg could be knocked by these departures. I know they've brought in a couple of names as well. They've made a few transfers themselves, which we can talk about maybe another time. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, Jens Jakob Thomasson came on and made his debut. He's come from Nîmes. So Steve, you might know him. But yeah, I think Elfsborg are going to need a win. You know, they're going to need to win maybe the next game, kind of make a statement. But yeah, great win for Hammarby.
Yeah, just looking at the three departures for Elfsborg in this window. Jakob Ondrejka, obviously we knew that was happening. Royal Antwerp 1.5 million. Gustav Lagerbielke is 3.4 million is a decent fee to Celtic. Also, Andre Roma left to Midtjylland. I mean, I feel like we never even talked about Roma and Lagerbielke too much on the podcast before, but by the sounds of it, fairly integral parts of their season this year. Let's talk about this centre-back that Celtic have signed then. We have several Celtic listeners on the podcast. I know that. What sort of player they got for their money? Is it a good buy, or is he going to struggle? Tell me more about him.
Yeah, it's a good buy, but good buy in the sense of goodbye. Arrivederci. He is, or I don't know how they say goodbye in Scotland. Like, is there a
Toodle pip?
Toodle pip. Yeah, I mean, they've got themselves a player. That's all I know. I rate him. I think it's a great move for all parties. I think it was probably the right time for Lagerbielke to move on. 23 years old. He played for Degerfors last season, and he had a really good season on loan. And then he's come back to Elfsborg and kind of gone into the first team, and he's really solidified his place as one of Allsvenskan's top centre backs, in my opinion. And when I saw the links to Celtic, I thought to myself, that could be a real problem for Elfsborg, because he's just a very sort of central point of their defence. You know, that defence. You know, I made the comment in a few weeks back that Elfsborg seemed to sort of almost be playing with a pipe and slippers in certain games. The way Larsson, the way Hult just drifting through matches, like, you know, like sort of like almost in a regal way, if you know what I mean, like really just kind of as like sort of nonchalant, like we're above this league almost feel to them, you know what I mean? And Lagerbielke plays into that. He's very, I mean, he can get amongst it, but he's also got that sort of classiness about him, which I thought he was showing and demonstrating. And I feel that he's a key pillar of that defense that looks so solid at times. Certain games where they've gone to places like Kalmar, gone to places like Djurgården and absolutely battered them. Getting clean sheets. I know some of the games he missed, but winning away at Elfsborg, for example. Sorry, winning away at AIK, for example. Getting a goal in the 3-0 win against Malmo. He got a goal there. Generally speaking, if we just look at the raw stats, he's got this season just in terms of his passing and what kind of stylistically, he's got an 86% passing completion accuracy this season, averaging about 50 passes per match. Long passes, 69.6% accuracy, 12 per 90. So, he can ping a pass. He's decent in the air, aerial duels. Not amazing, actually, 62% win percentage, but 6.49 per game, according to Wyscout. And as I've said, he can pop up with a goal every now and then, as he did against Malmo, and also against Mjällby. You got the winner in that game early in the season. I do think he's kind of ready for Celtic, to be honest. I noticed they got rid of obviously Carl Starfelt, who was from EFK Göteborg, who I don't like to be harsh on players, but I never felt that Starfelt was going to sort of go on from Celtic, if you know what I mean. I thought that was kind of his level, whereas I feel like Lagerbielke, if he adapts, I feel like he could maybe go on another level. I think he's got the tools to be a kind of like very good centre back, maybe in a top 5 league. So it's a good signing for Celtic. That's the way I'd summarise it. I mean, just a few stats there basically, but I think the fee is €3 million, which I think is fair value. I think Elfsborg will be happy with that, but obviously, probably they would have been happier with that happening in December rather than whilst they're trying to win a title.
Interesting stuff. Just want to do a little bit of housekeeping now before we finish up. Some questions that have come in, some comments I want to say. Bottas, not Valtteri, tweeted in and said, "Hi guys, please do the top 3 fan bases for each league. The debate and fallout would be great. Maybe one day we'll do it. Although you're right, we'll certainly get a bit of criticism from some quarters, wouldn't we? The Besta League, Besta English, have asked a couple of things here. We've had some big talent move to both your leagues this summer. This is from the Icelandic League. Curious if any of them excite you. So we've got Isaac Andri, grabbed an assist for Norrköping last round, and Nokvason, nicknamed Gummy, has already seen time for Mjällby, and Godset are apparently going to get the best left back in the league with Logi. And Oscar Borg went to Sognal. So there's a bit of an Icelandic invasion here. We had that with Rosenborg a bit last year as well. Do any of those 2 players excite you for Allsvenskan?
I have to be honest, I don't know a huge amount about them. I mean, I usually rely on my knowledge of those leagues from that podcast. So shout out to Joe and the work you guys are doing there. I can't say I know a huge amount. I kind of rely on you guys to tell me if he's any good. But I mean, you said Godset signed one of them, so you tell me, Steve.
I am always fairly excited about talent that comes in from Iceland. The only downside is pronunciation of players. Some of them are an absolute mouthful, aren't they? So, but you can get some real gems up there. That league, I think, has been improving. Like I say, big shout out to the Besta League. Give it a follow at Besta English. It's been run by Joe Gold. There's been some good content on there. If you're into Icelandic football, then absolutely give it a follow. So I'll be watching these new signings with interest. Godset do have a history of signing some Icelandic players, so that doesn't shock me entirely there. And I think Norrköping have a history of it as well, don't they? So
yeah, I mean, one thing I'd say is I usually rely on Joe to give me the information. He has told me about 1 or 2 players there. And if you haven't followed at Besta English, definitely get on it. It's an unofficial fan-operated account of Icelandic Besta Dialed-in, and it's run by 2 great guys. And Joe, talented guy, Joe, long-time listener, talented graphic designer as well, by the way. He's helped me with 1 or 2 little projects recently, and he's done some of our graphics, including our logo, Steve. So talented guy, Joe Gould, and long-time loyal listener of this podcast. So shout out to Joe. Thanks for your support as always. But yeah, I think with those sort of players, you're always keeping an eye on them. I mean, I do think it's a step up from Iceland to Sweden. Some do it immediately. I think some take a bit more time. So I think I've learned over the years to not get too carried away, because I do feel like it's a bit of a step up, especially if you go into one of the top clubs. As you mentioned there, Steve, Norrköping always seems to be a bit of a landing pad for some of them. But yeah,
they did play. I actually have watched a few streams of matches up there this year, and I was shocked how good the technical level was. I mean, I think pretty much every pitch is artificial now. I think that helps football played on the ground. I was impressed how well. I had this vision of long hoofball football, a bit scrappy, but actually it was some decent technical stuff. So I think there's players coming out of that league now who are ready for the bigger Scandinavian leagues. I do want to give a shout out to one of their teams in Europe, Breidablik. Unfortunately, they got battered over 2 legs in their Europa League qualifier by, I think, Zrin. I don't know, one of the Bosnian teams. I'm not even going to go into pronunciation. They're the first Bosnian team that are going to be guaranteed group stage. And that only leaves now, I think, 7 nations have never been involved in the UEFA group stage. And Iceland is one of those countries. But Breidablik, if they were to get past Macedonian side Struga over 2 legs, would become the first Icelandic side in a group stage of a UEFA competition. So that would be rather interesting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And I think you said was maybe 1 or 2 more questions. We're nearly done.
Yes, there's a couple more. Where was it?
The question about, just to answer the question about fan bases, we're gonna have to address that maybe towards the end of the season, because that's like half an episode worth of discussion. And by the way, Steve, I want to get 1 more trip into Gothenburg before I do that, because I may never be able to return after that discussion. So you definitely, whoever's asked, I mean, I've seen the question from Bottas. I think it is. You definitely want us to be in trouble in that one, isn't it? I think you're asking for trouble with that, but no, I think we will do it at some point.
Guppy FBL asks, what happened to Sarpsborg? Good question. Their defense has fallen apart again, Guppy, really. Just like he did last season, similar phase. They're just far too open. Jack Hacken, FCP, who has the username who we can't really give out on this episode, on this show, makes an interesting point about the Portuguese league outside the top 4 of its big teams. Obviously, in response to Aruca being knocked out by Bran. And basically, he's sort of maybe suggesting that the standard below those teams is not that good either. Maybe he's right. But I said I watched Braga recently, and they look excellent. So it's like, where do you cut the line off? Is 4 big teams is quite decent, isn't it? Below that, I don't know what their qualification process is for teams to get in and stuff, but maybe there are leagues out there in Europe where they're overrated because of 2 or 3 big teams, if you know what I mean.
I think we've started a bit of a debate here, Steve, and I think listeners of this podcast are clocking onto something that I alluded to in that conversation about 20, where, well, should I say rant maybe about 20 and Dutch football. Like, I think the overriding feeling, like the conclusion is, whether or not, whatever league we're talking about, I think Scandinavian football is improving and is on the up, and I think they can challenge these bigger leagues now, bigger teams. Aruca is just the latest example. I can't comment on Portuguese football below the big 3, or however, Benfica, obviously, Sporting, Porto, Braga are quite a big club as well, aren't they? I think they would be comfortably better than most Scandinavian teams. But yeah, I think that my overall conclusion, I mean, you've just reeled off, Steve, a load of names of players who've been sold for big money to other leagues. There's clearly the talent in these leagues that we're covering at the moment. So I feel fairly comfortable with my rant. I mean, it was a little bit maybe harsh on 1 or 2, but I think people are sort of waking up. That comment just sums it up. I think people are waking up to the fact that there's players in these leagues that can go to those sort of leagues and handle themselves fine. The flip side of it is, just going back to the original conversation, Steve, that started this show, I thought that Rosenborg will comfortably beaten by a Scottish team. So I guess it swings and roundabouts, but I definitely think it's trending upwards, Scandinavian football. I don't feel like the days where you would go to, say, maybe Portugal or the Netherlands or something like that and get absolutely destroyed are here. But then again, 3 of the 4 Swedish teams went out without a whimper. So yes, it's an interesting conversation, and anyone who tweets in their thoughts, we always respect your feedback and your comments. Like, we're always open minded. As long as you're not talking about Tromsø, I think we're fairly open minded on this show. So yeah, tweet us at Nordic Football Pod, of course, and we appreciate your support and comments.
Yes, I think one thing you got to say is that there's always a dynamic with leagues. Leagues change as well, and we go back to that Hearts match tonight. Basically, you'd say maybe Hearts' 3rd or 4th best team in Scotland. I don't know. Certainly one of the top 5 have. It's been an even match against what at this stage what is a mid-table Eliteserien club. That's a positive for the Eliteserien, isn't it? Because if a mid-table side like that could go toe-to-toe over 2 legs, then you'd expect one of the current top 3 or 4 to perhaps beat them. It's all ifs and buts, maybes, things like that. We'll always have this debate, but it's always good being with you as ever, Jonathan. And I think that will wrap up this show. Thanks all who listened, and appreciate all your questions in there and your kind words as always. But that's it from this edition.
Yeah, if you've listened to the whole episode, well done to you, and we always appreciate your support. I hope you've got your Nordic Football Podcast fix. If you'd like to support us, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. We always appreciate anyone who wants to sort of contribute, get access to the extra bonus content, and also just support us and help us, keep the running costs going of the podcast, because it's good, always good. Steve, I just want to, before we wrap up, one thing I did actually miss, and then we will end it, is we have a massive game this weekend, by the way, at the bottom of the league in Allsvenskan, Degerfors against IFK Göteborg. Now, I know some people still remember my Degerfors rant, but they've had a bit of an upturn in fortunes lately. They got a massive win against Varnum over the weekend. IFK also got a win against Djurgården, a late win. This is potentially a relegation decider, Steve. I think if Degerfors win this, IFK are on the brink. So this is a massive game, by the way. So if you've got time to watch it, I think this is going to be a big one. But you don't want to miss this game this weekend. So, is there any other games in Norway maybe we should keep an eye out for, like, that you're particularly looking forward to, or is that it?
I don't think there's like a really big game that whetted my appetite this weekend.
Yeah, but okay, Degerfors, IFK, get in for that. And if you are on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast, we are going to look at the weekend's games. So go to that, subscribe for the extra content, and you will hear maybe 1 or 2 little predictions and discussions. So thank you so much for your support. I hope you've enjoyed this show. And also, we love your tweets and stuff like that. So when we did get that tweet from Joe Gould saying, "Where's your pod?" It did give us a bit of a kick up the arse. So yeah, really appreciate it. And that'll be it.
Yeah, take care, everyone. See you next time. Goodbye.